Hi everyone, this is Dan Gregg speaking. It's a nice sunny day out here on the first day of the week, and I'm going to do this without any script. So somebody on the channel asked, is hell real? Is hell real? So I believe in more or less what the Seventh-day Adventists believe about hell, and that's that the wicked will be destroyed in the lake of fire. It will be an annihilation. An annihilation, and that means the end of existence. So when you see the word hell in your English Bibles, it usually refers to the grave, okay? The Hebrew word Sheol. And it doesn't have the connotations that the church puts on the modern term hell, which would be endless, eternal or endless torment in a fiery abyss, in a lake of fire. That's the modern connotation of the word hell, okay? But in the scripture, the word hell, you could call it a mistranslation in terms of the modern sense. It's equivalent to the word Sheol or grave. Okay, so it just refers to where the dead are put. Okay, so it can refer to where a dead body is put, a hole in the ground, or a gravestone or a tomb. Okay, the lake of fire is mentioned in the book of Revelation, and in different passages about destroying the enemies of God. And whether the lake of fire exists or not, we don't know. It's only known for sure to prophetically exist in the book of Revelation. And the wicked are thrown into the lake of fire, where the purpose of fire is to destroy something or to unmake it, basically. So fire is a kind of purification, a final purification. Things are purified by fire in Scripture. Okay, so what about the parable of Lazarus and the rich man? Now, I called it a parable, but people will object and say, oh, it's not a parable, it's literal. Well, let's address that issue for a minute. Okay, Yeshua begins the story of this story with a certain man. There was a certain man, okay? And this is typical language for telling a fictional story. Okay? So he begins many of his stories, there was a certain man, okay? Now, not every religious figures in the scripture can tell fictional stories. A really famous one is when Nathan the prophet went to King David and told him a fictional story about a man who was a rich man who stored his poor neighbor's only sheep and sacrificed it when he had many sheep himself. Okay, it was a fictional story to illustrate a point about David's sin. Okay, well, Yeshua was telling the story of Lazarus and the rich man for the same reason. He was illustrating the sin of the Pharisees in not listening to the Torah and prophets concerning who he was. The punchline of the story is, of course, if they won't listen to Moses and the prophet, then neither will they listen to someone who comes from the dead. And of course, that's what Yeshua literally did. He came back from the dead, okay? And they're still not listening to him to this day. Okay, so you can see the parallelism. Nathan tells a story to King David that's not literal, that has a spiritual application to David's life, okay? And Yeshua is telling a story concerning the Pharisees that's not literal, that has a spiritual application to their life. Okay, so what about some of the elements in the story of Lazarus and the rich man? Well, there's certain things that you wouldn't normally expect, that you might expect in a fictional story, like the dead the wicked being able to talk to the righteous in this place. Okay, or communication with Abraham. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says that the dead don't know anything, okay? And in the rest of Scripture, it describes death like a sleep. So before people are thrown in the lake of fire, they're in a sleep-like state. And typically, the church denies this also, okay? Saying, well, that's figurative language. Well, we can go back to the paradigm of God's justice. God's justice should be, at the very worst, an equitable justice. And we see that in the law and prophets, the penalty, the deterrence penalty for a crime is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, stripe for stripe, and so on. Okay, so to speak of an eternal torment is to pervert this law of justice. It's to give a form of justice that exceeds the crime, okay? And I believe that God's just measures, the Scripture puts a limitation on them, all right? And the act of justice isn't meant to pay back or compensate the victims. It's meant to send a message of disapproval, okay? So because it's not meant to pay back or compensate, we're not seeking an eternal duration, or we're not seeking a kind of justice that exceeds the crime. We're just seeking one that sends a message, okay? So in the end, the wicked are destroyed in the lake of fire, okay? Their existence is ended, all right? And in the meantime, before the last judgment, both the righteous and the wicked sleep in the dust of the earth, okay, until the resurrection of the righteous, or until the resurrection of the wicked. Now, I've done quite a bit of translation of the Good News of Messiah to alleviate some of the problem verses. One of them is, in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, okay, which is the refrain, okay, and so that gets interpreted that in hell there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth while they're being eternally tormented. So that additional idea that I just plopped onto it actually isn't part of the Scripture. It just says there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And part of the problem translation is the word there, okay, which I translate thither, or to there, or toward there. So in the Greek, it's actually ambiguous. If you ask somebody, where are you going? And they say, well, we're going there. Okay, well, they're traveling to a place, right? So to thither, or I like the word thither, Thither, means toward a place, or thither, okay? And so if Yeshua is saying to there, what he means is when they hear what's going to happen to them and they're being taken off to the lake of fire, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, but ultimately the fire will do its work and they will be destroyed. Now, since I've used sin is ultimately a corruption or a disease that needs to be cleansed, and the blood of Yeshua cleanses us from all sin. Okay, so that's the meaning of the cross. The meaning of atonement is to purge. Okay, well, if somebody won't cooperate with God through faithfulness in purging of sin, then in the end it's necessary for the fire to purge his creation of the sinner. Okay, so it's not unjust for God to remove a contamination, a person who won't cooperate with him in his created order. So that's how I view the final fate of the wicked, and it's not a pretty fate, but I don't believe that hell is an eternal torment. I do believe that Satan and his angels will receive some torment into the ages of the ages, but we aren't told how long that will be, maybe a long time, to send an even louder message and And yes, I do hold the possibility that maybe some human beings who are especially wicked will receive something corresponding to stripe for stripe and wound for wound. Okay, who engaged in the murders of many people or in the torment of many people. But that's not most human beings. Okay, so I think God is just, and He's not an overbearing tyrant. He just wants to clean up the sin in His creation and give people a chance who are sinners to turn away from it before He has to enter in and remove the contamination. All right, thank you for listening. Daniel Gregg, over and out.